The time is just gone 20 minutes past 8 a.m. as we kick off with the program, looking at financial services, looking at the banking industry in South Africa.
Rejuvenating
now, for
media.
a very long time, we've seen civil society flexing its muscles against racist banks in protest. And Rand Merchant Bank and many other banks obviously have been seen as coming together and practicing what is called financial racism. And we joined on the line this morning by board member of Steinhoff International Compensation Claims Foundation, Tahir Maepa. Tahir, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for having me, Ari.
Right now, the banks have been under the radar and in the spotlight for a very, very long time, particularly looking at transformation in the country and also in terms of the power that banks actually hold in South Africa, in the South African economy. Now, this has been going on for a very, very long time, and looking at a number of organizations like the EFF, for instance, looking at COSAS, looking at Senko, and also the ANC have expressed concerns with regard to these banks and how they actually, and the role that they are playing in the economy of the country.
No, most certainly. The issue of the behavior of banks towards people of color is not only a South African problem, it's an international problem. You would know that, for instance, in the United States, the very same challenges that we have here as Black people, as far as the banks are concerned, they are facing them. The banks have the policy of racial profiling Black people insofar as banking is concerned, and they target in the main the Black people and Black businesses in terms of bank closures. And if you look at the numbers of repossessions insofar as houses and cars and so forth, Black people are at the attack front as far as the banks are concerned. And me and you, if we go to a bank to go and lend money, we are not treated the same as other people of color, other races like white people. We are being given rates that are astronomical, that are not fair because of the color of our skin. And that has been going on for quite some time. And we as civil society, we have reached a point where we're saying that this needs to stop. We need to challenge the racist and discriminatory nature of the banks, and we seek a fairness, and banking system needs to be transformed in order for it to be fair to every citizen of this country.
There you make a very important point, because this is not only a phenomenon in South Africa, but when one looks at bank and when one looks at banking ownership, now for a long time we know that just over a dozen families, about 13 families, that actually own the banking system throughout the entire world. Now this just shows how much power these banks actually wield in countries and right across the entire globe. Coming back to South Africa now, I know the target has been Rand Merchant Bank and also FNB. And as far as these protests are concerned, what message are you sending, and what what are some of the issues that you are obviously telling these banks that, listen, yeah, you need to get your act in order?
Well, what is amazing is that even the banks themselves, they have not in so many ways, but confessed that indeed Black people are not treated the same like other races. Now, the engagement that we're trying to have with the banks is not a civil engagement, because they are not civilized people. Like you say, they have too much power, and that power goes unabated. Governments are afraid of the banks because of banks basically control the economies of countries. And what is also make things difficult is that these banks, in as much as the ownership lies in the hands of few white families across the globe, and similarly in South Africa, the shareholding of most of these banks are predominantly in the hands of white people. So basically, they have leverage in terms of controlling the economies of the country and controlling the political parties. If you look at most of these banks, what they've done is that they've taken most of the politicians, especially from the ruling parties, they sit on their board or subsidiaries of their companies and so forth, in order to make sure that anything that has to do with banks is always protected. And that is why the ruling party hasn't really moved against the banks, despite the fact that the banks have been engaged in a lot of criminal activities, including the manipulation of the rand and so forth. But they don't have the guards to go after them because of most of them, their hands are in the cookie jar. They are being funded by the same bank, and they don't care about ordinary people. But what is important is that over 80% of the clients of the banks in this country is people of color, it's black people. And there is no way that we can allow a situation where they continue treating us in this particular fashion. And the only way to confront them is to mobilize the power, the economic power that sustains these banks. And these are the ordinary citizens of this country. And people are starting to be conscious about it. If you look at our hashtag, racist banks must fall, and you read the stories that our people are posting, the manner in which the banks are treating them, it's really amazing. I mean, I'll give you an example. I wanted to pay a consultant that did some work for me in Kenya, a mere nearly 10,000 rand. You don't know how many documents I had to sign in order for that money to be released. But yet, you find people who transfer millions, if not billions, through these banks without checks and balances. We have had a situation, one of the big business men who was found with about 6 million rand flying out of the country with it. And the question is that where did he get that 6 million rand? He withdrew it from the bank, and nobody is asking them questions. Simply because of their white, they are getting away with criminality, and that criminality is going to stop and must stop now.
Yes. Now, obviously, there are a number of other issues as well, and considering, Tahir, where we are at this point in time is an economy, as people who are in debt. Now, especially this COVID era, we've seen so many job losses. We've seen, people obviously in debt to these banks by way of, the financing that banks offer, whether it's their cars, whether it's their homes, and banks have been ruthless. We've seen even last year with the hard lockdown, and we found that banks have not been very accommodating in understanding the situation that people on the ground are faced with, particularly those that are indebted to banks.
Most definitely, and this is where the problem is. Despite the fact that we all know the situation in the country, the banks, like you put it, they've been ruthless, and really they haven't been sort of humane insofar as understanding that people find themselves in this situation not because of the fault of theirs, but because of everybody's going through this. But the fact of the matter is that the banks don't really care. Government gave the banks 200 million to help black business in particular, as a stimulus to sustain them. And they kept that money. They never distributed that money. But if you look at the statistics, the number of repossessions, whether be it housing or cars and all that, majority, if not all, it's always black people. So white people can go and make some have discussions with the banks in order for them to defer these debts until they have for over a period of 12 months. But as a black person, even if you go and try and negotiate some relief, you will never be able. They tell you that, you know what, you can't pay this car, you haven't paid this car for 3 months, let us keep this car, and then when you have money, you can come. Now, this is the car that you've been paying for the past 3 years. You are left with about 50,000 rand, and they take that car because they really don't care. They don't care about black people, and they have no sympathy towards us. And these are the kinds of things that we're saying that the banks need to change their policies. But for them to change these policies, the Reserve Bank need to come to the fore and change the manner in which the banks are operating. The rules of the game need to be changed to be accommodative of the circumstances of this country.
Well, Tahir, we definitely will follow developments, but for now, we say Jazakallah to you, shukran for your time with us this morning here on Salam Media on News and Views. All the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Board member of Steinhoff International Compensation Claims Foundation, Tahir Maepa, with us this morning.